Hello everyone, I'm Michaela Kathleen, and in this video I'm going to be talking about books that changed my reading tastes. This is an idea that I believe was originally made by Emma over on Emma Books, and she's actually done this video twice, so I will link both of her original videos down below. But basically the concept is I'm going to be talking about books that before reading them I either did not or very rarely read in this genre or this type of book, and after reading this book I more regularly read this type of book and seek it out specifically because I read this book. So the first book that had a major impact on my reading tastes is the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling, and I really credit Harry Potter with my love of reading in general. I did not really like reading before reading Harry Potter, and so Harry Potter changed my reading tastes in that it gave me reading tastes, basically. But I also credit it with my early childhood love of fantasy. I basically only read fantasy as a child, and that would mainly be because of Harry Potter. When I was a kid, I really enjoyed being read to. My mom read to me a lot. We loved Junie B. Jones. That was definitely our favorite, but I was not very good at reading myself, and so I did not enjoy it, and I really did not read for myself at all. But fantasy is not my mom's favorite genre, and Harry Potter is rather larger than Junie B. Jones, and she really didn't know how to pronounce a lot of the made-up words, so she really just did not enjoy reading this one aloud to me. And so this is one where she said I would have to read it for myself if I wanted to read it. And so I did, and I have never looked back since. And so this is the one that kicked it all off for me. And I believe I read this one for the first time when I was 9 or 10 years old. I started reading it after the second movie came out. That was when I could not take it anymore. I had to read the books, because I loved the movies so much and I wanted to see what the books were like as well. Next I have Uglies by Scott Westerfeld, which is the book that I credit for my love of dystopians. I think the only other dystopian I had read before Uglies was The Last Book in the Universe by Rodman Philbrick, which is the first book that I read after Harry Potter. But I think as a kid, I did not really think much about genres. I knew I liked fantasy, and I pretty much just stuck with that, and I didn't really think about genres much beyond fantasy. So even though The Last Book in the Universe was one of my favorite books as a kid, I didn't really know per se that it was a dystopian. I don't think I really knew what dystopian was. And so I credit my real love for dystopian to Uglies, because this is the first dystopian I read that made me want to read more dystopians, more books like this. And this remains my favorite dystopian series. It is just the classic for me. It is such a fast-paced and action-packed series that is so fun to read. Next, I have The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. And once again, I had read YA books before The Fault in Our Stars, much like I had read a dystopian book before Uglies, but this is the first one that really made me want to read more YAs. As a kid, I think the first YA I was really into was The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, but at that time I still didn't really think much about YA as a whole. I thought YA was kind of more girly and I was more of a tomboy, and so I sort of had this anti-YA feeling as a kid. But after The Fault in Our Stars, my YA reading massively increased. I now read YA probably more than any other genre, and that is definitely due to The Fault in Our Stars. It was such an emotional book, and so it really kind of let me know that YA could be deeper than I thought. And of course I mean contemporary YA. Obviously there can be fantasy YA and etc., but this one was the first contemporary YA that made me want to read more of that, more stuff that takes place in the real world. Next, I have The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. And this one got me into reading historical fiction and also just more adult books in general, more mature books, but especially historical fiction. When it does come to more adult books, I tend to still mostly look for ones that are rooted in history. I am especially interested in World War II stories, which is what The Book Thief is. I just loved the story so much, and the concept was really cool and unique. The fact that the book is narrated by death was very interesting, and I think is what helped me get into it, where other historical fictions maybe wouldn't have grabbed me as my introduction to that genre, because it did add this sort of fantastical element and just gave this really interesting perspective that wasn't just a regular person in history. Finally, I have Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, which is the first nonfiction book that I actually went out and bought. Before this, I would occasionally read nonfiction, usually autobiographies of celebrities I was interested in. The one that kind of sticks out in my head is Ozzy Osbourne. My parents were big into 80s rock, as am I, so I was interested in his autobiography, but with these, it was few and far between, and I would always just go get them from the library. I was never really interested in owning them. I didn't think I would want to reread them. This is the first one that had me excited enough that I was like, I want to own this book. So I went out and bought it before even reading it, and have since then gotten more okay with the idea of buying nonfiction and potentially rereading nonfiction. I love Pixar so much. As a kid, I had my big dream job as like working at Pixar as literally anything. Although specifically storyboard artist was my dream one that I wanted, despite the fact that I'm not really that great at art. But yeah, that childhood fascination definitely fueled my interest in purchasing this book. And it just sort of made me realize that owning nonfiction books that I could learn from and that I could look back on might not be the worst thing in the world. So yeah, these are 5 books that have really shaped my tastes in reading. I'm hoping to add a new book to this stack at some point within like the next year. My TBR list is so long that the books that I have in mind, it would be a while before I read them whenever I did get around to buying them. But I do think I would like to try a poetry book or a book told in verse. In the last year, I've discovered Button Poetry on YouTube. I will link their channel down below. It's really awesome. And I've really enjoyed listening to the poetry on there. I've never been super into reading poetry, but since discovering that, I've thought that I really should give poetry another chance, and I'm especially interested in trying out some feminist poetry. So I've got 4 poetry books on my wish list that I would like to try at least one of them, and hopefully it'll be a book that changed my tastes in reading. On that list are The Poet X, Milk and Honey, The Princess Saves Herself in this one, and Shout. So hopefully those will be added to this stack of books that have shaped my reading tastes in the near future, because hopefully I will enjoy it and I will want to read more poetry. So 5 books here that changed my reading tastes, and hopefully one on the horizon. Let me know down below what books have shaped your reading tastes over the years. Thanks for watching. Remember, words matter.